Hello, Aperture from Rogue Tactics here, with another magical Musketeer video. Who'd have thought? Now, this time I want to deal with the topic of Utopia Double. Now, Utopia Double is an incredibly controversial card. It's such a strong card that if you end up including it in your builds end up turbo Utopia Double, and if you exclude it from your build, it becomes more of a control-based build. Now, let's take a look on the obvious upsides and downsides of this card. The main draw of Utopia Double is the ability to hit something for 10k and just instantly win the game turn 1. That's a very strong and very reliable effect that can go off in our deck, because we can make it with nearly any two monsters. Hell, Starfire by herself makes this card. Cross Dom drops an opponent's monster's attack to 0, which lets us always swing for 10k. We also have Instant Fusion, Max, Calamity, Starfire, which all are one card Utopia doubles. And under Mystic Mine, this card can't really be hand trapped or all that, but that requires you to have Mine in the first place. For those of you unfamiliar with the combo, all you have to do is cross domination one of your opponent's monsters, which makes its attack 0, somehow get 2 level 4s on the board, make Utopia Double, activate Utopia Double's effect, which searches double or nothing, and then overlays Utopia on top of Utopia Double. You enter battle, you negate your own attack, you play the double or nothing you searched, and you attack the 0 monster with a 5k, which doubles during the battle, and does 10k damage and ends the duel. It's incredibly simple for what it offers, and overall very reliable in muskets, but the main problem is that most boards nowadays won't let you do that reliably. I'll touch on that later, but right now let's touch on the big downsides of the card. I mentioned earlier that nearly any hand trap can stop this card, and it does. This card lacks any self-protection, and a singular negate, pop, stop will end this card and stop the entire combo from working. You also have to give up 2 level 4s to make this, and in muskets sometimes you struggle to get multiple cards out. And sometimes you may only have 2 muskets, and overlaying those 2 cards gives up your ability to use your musket spell and trap cards. That is absolutely huge in some matchups. Also, if you don't raw draw a cross dom, or your opponent doesn't have any monsters, has no monsters in attack, or all their monsters are above 2000 attack, this really doesn't work, and if anyone really lets you search cross dom without disrupting your muskets in some way, shape, or form with a standard musket hand, there's a very large possibility they just have a hand trap or something waiting for that. Not to say you can't search a cross dom, but in the situations where you can just raw search a cross dom and do all these things, you were probably going to win that duel anyways without Utopia Double. And the general really good tier 1 or tier 0 decks that build a big board will definitely not let you do that. The other major downside of running this combo is that you are forced to run double or nothing, the spell card. That card is dead in your hand, and the only purpose of the spell is to be searched through Utopia Double. I'll get into some odds later with the card, but overall, there's a very high chance that every game you will probably see this card, or in some way, shape, or form it may hinder you if you can't pull off the combo. The Utopia Double strategy also conflicts with the more generic negates we were able to play, such as Dark Ruler No More and Evenly Matched. Personally, I believe the impact of Dark Ruler and Evenly Matched far outweighs Utopia Double, but that's really up to you to decide. Now, let's take a look at some end boards from the top tier decks this format, and see if Utopia Double is practical against them in comparison to Dark Ruler or Evenly. You look at this average Spiral board, and you can see that it's almost impossible to break with a normal musket hand. You have to out Spiral Sleeper, Appaloosa, and Trigate, all of which have some sort of disruption that hinders our muskets heavily. Most musket builds I see don't actually run generic disruption, and they instead focus around cross domination, desperado, last stand, mind control, with really no answer to some blanket effects or other ways of getting around it like that, especially untargetable cards like Spiral Sleeper, and they end up suffering because of it. I see a lot of musket players content with losing game 1 against a large majority of decks, just so they have the option of double or nothing against random decks. I don't believe that's a very good strategy to have, and I would wholeheartedly sacrifice double or nothing plays for more generic negates or blanket effects that allows our muskets to go off reliably. Now if we look at the same spiral board, but we just add Dark Ruler to our hand, or evenly, it seems way better, doesn't it? Those two cards that are incompatible with double or nothing are arguably the strongest cards this format, and will win the games, they will allow you to play games, and generally people won't expect them game 1. This exact scenario happens when you look at other decks, like let's look at Ultra Geist. Now this is already a very hard matchup for us, but the double or nothing package legitimately does nothing against them. And again, it's our hardest matchup, so why wouldn't we play cards or something to negate that weakness? You pop random Dark Ruler or evenly in your hand, and suddenly the matchup looks way better. And that's not factoring in any spell or trap removal you may or not be running. It's also an issue against blanket effects that some decks tend to run. Like BA Block Dragon, it's not uncommon for them to end on something like Avermax, Naturia Beast, and a Fossil Dyna. In fact, it's almost every game. And if you're only running one Cross Dom as a form of negate, that's not going to cut it against this deck. If you haven't noticed, muskets have an issue with cards that remove the musket from the field on summon. Ergo Spiral Sleeper, Solemns, Beatrice sending Farfa, all that stuff. It's a really big deal, and unless you're running cards that specifically let you get over that, or somehow negate that weakness, you auto-lose those matchups. And a lot of the times, the cards that help you deal with these things, they directly conflict with Utopia Double, and it's disappointing to see that. So what you're really asking yourself, if you want to run Utopia Double, is if you're okay with not using Dark Ruler, Evenly Matched, and Anti-Magic Arrows if you're running that card. Because all three of those either give up your battle phase or make you unable to do damage for the turn in exchange for literally just being able to break a board for free. For some people, it's a legitimate challenge to decide what they want to play, and for others, the answer is plain and simple. You need to know the risks and benefit of any card you're playing, and based on that, you should decide whether or not to play it. Another big thing about this combo is that you have to search double or nothing from your deck in order to use it properly. And that means double or nothing has to be in your deck, and not your hand, or your banish pile. Just doing some quick odds at the start of the game, when you start with 6 cards, you have a 15% chance of opening raw double or nothing, which completely ruins the strategy. Now, let's say you want to use Pot of Desires. If you Pot of Desires with your 6-card hand, banish 10 and draw 2, there is a 45% chance that the card you banished, or the card you drew, or the cards already in your hand, there is one double or nothing in there. That's not even factoring in Ash Blossom or Droll and Lockbird, both of which completely ruin this combo if they're allowed to go off, and a smart player, if they see this happening, will just either insta-burn Droll or Lock, or wait to Ash Double, because you can actually do that. If you can't tell already, Utopia Double is a very, very strong Glass Cannon type card, but muskets overall are a relatively fragile archetype, and I believe that you should run more generic or blanket effects that help you play the game, rather than unreliable effects, though while powerful, are either bricky or easy to disrupt. Of course, there are always ways to negate a card's weakness, such as Fantastical Dragon Phantasme's draw effect and putting back double or nothing in your deck in case you did draw it, but still, the cracks in the strategy are very obvious. So really, when you're asking yourself, should I run Utopia Double? You should be asking yourself, am I going to give up the use of Dark Ruler, Pot of Desires, and Evenly Matched for a chance to OTK? Well, thanks for listening to this whole discussion, and feel free to comment below what you think about this whole debacle. And again, thanks for watching.